So back in 2006, millions of kids all around the world basically convinced their parents to buy them a copy of Pokemon Diamond or Pearl.
Right, yeah. And then Platinum a bit later.
Exactly, the definitive version, Pokemon Platinum.
Yeah.
But what those kids didn't really know, what the brightly lit commercials and the really colorful box art completely failed to mention, was that buried beneath those snowy towns and the gym battles and the upbeat music, there was this sprawling, pitch-black abyss.
A literal abyss.
Right, a digital landscape
Yeah.
that had, invisible walls and terrifying anomalies, silent ghosts, and even fragments of ancient, real-world human history just buried in there.
It really is the ultimate illusion of control, I think, because, we approach a digital world expecting a guided tour.
Yeah.
We sort of expect the developers to point and say, here is the content we made for you, and we just assume the boundaries of that world are totally solid.
But they really aren't.
No, not at all. Sinnoh is basically the absolute definition of a fragile, living ecosystem. It's built on this code that, well, it occasionally bends or breaks or just hides its most profound secrets completely in the shadows.
And that is exactly what we are getting into today.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone to a very special, profoundly relaxing deep dive.
Absolutely.
If you can, take a moment right now to just grab a warm beverage, find a comfortable spot, maybe, pull a blanket over your shoulders and just settle in.
The vibe today is very cozy.
Very cozy. We want you to feel like you're just sitting in a dim room on a rainy evening, right, listening to the sound of drops tapping against the glass and reading a fascinating, maybe slightly eerie book about a world you really thought you knew.
I mean, it's the perfect environment for what we're about to uncover because we aren't looking at optimal stats or, competitive battling or how to beat the Elite Four today.
No, definitely not.
We're looking at the architecture of a digital masterpiece and the really strange phenomena that happen when that architecture is pushed to its absolute limits.
Exactly. We are exploring the quiet corners of the code, the fun facts, the hidden lore, the really obscure bugs, and the Easter eggs that make this universe feel like genuinely alive.
Yeah.
Today's journey is entirely about decoding the dark. We're peeling back the layers of these games to find the really soothing hidden mysteries just beneath the surface. And, if you find yourself getting lost in this world with us today, please make sure to like and subscribe to this deep dive so we can just keep exploring together.
Definitely. And to truly appreciate the depth of these games and really just the sheer artistry of how they were built, I think we have to start with the quiet, atmospheric detail.
The hidden stuff.
Right. Game Freak, the development studio, they have this long history of hiding things right in plain sight. These are details meant to reward only the most observant, patient players.
Like they don't hold your hand.
Exactly. They aren't announced with big text boxes or tutorials. They just sort of exist, waiting to be noticed.
The one that always stands out to me, just because of how purely atmospheric it is Snow Point City.
Oh, yes. That's a great example.
Right, because for anyone who hasn't played in a while, Snow Point is this incredibly sleepy, snow-blanketed town at the extreme northern edge of the Sinnoh map.
It's very isolated.
Super isolated. And the music is just incredibly peaceful. It's got these slow, resonant bells and really soft synth pads.
Yeah, it really sets a mood.
It does. And you arrive there after literally trudging through a massive blizzard on the previous routes, so it genuinely feels like a sanctuary.
Yeah.
But there's a really specific secret tied to the weather there, isn't there?
There is, yeah. The phenomena is actually known within the community as diamond dust.
Diamond dust, okay.
Yeah, so on the vast majority of days when you walk your character through Snow Point City, you just see a regular, soft snowfall animation kind of overlaying the screen.
It's just standard white flakes.
Right, white flakes drifting down on a standard loop. But the Nintendo DS hardware actually had an internal clock, and the game actively checks the real-world date whenever you boot it up. So on very specific, hard-coded dates in the calendar, that standard snowfall is completely replaced.
I remember booting the game up on just a totally random winter weekend and genuinely stopping in my tracks.
It's quite striking when you aren't expecting it.
It really is.
Because the standard snow is replaced by this beautiful, shimmering, kind of crystallized sparkle effect that just glitters in the air.
It's so subtle, but it's unmistakably different.
Exactly. And the dates they picked aren't random at all. They actually hold deep personal meaning for the developers, or they represent big milestones for the franchise.
Like anniversaries and stuff?
Right. So for example, the first date players usually encounter this as January 12th. And that just so happens to be the birthday of the game's director, Junichi Masuda.
That is so sweet. It's like this quiet little birthday party thrown inside the game engine, but the guests are literally just the players who happen to log in that day.
It really is. And it also appears on leap year, so February 29th, serving as this rare aesthetic reward for playing on a day that only exists every 4 years.
Oh, I didn't know about the leap year one. That's so cool.
Yeah, and you'll also see it on dates corresponding to the original release anniversaries of various older games in the franchise.
Right.
It's entirely an aesthetic flourish. It serves absolutely no mechanical purpose.
Right, it doesn't make your Pokemon stronger. It doesn't give you a rare item.
It changes the mood.
I've always found that so incredibly charming. It's a digital weather pattern tied to real-world celebrations. But, visual Easter eggs are really only one piece of the puzzle here. There's an auditory one hidden inside a feature of the DS that I think really speaks to how cohesive they wanted this world to feel.
Are you talking about the Poketch?
I am talking about the Poketch calculator, yes.
Ah, the Poketch is such a fascinating piece of UI design.
It really was ahead of its time.
It was. So in the 4th generation, the bottom touchscreen of the Nintendo DS was utilized as a sort of digital smartwatch for your character.
Right, the Poketch.
Yeah, and as you played, you collected different little apps for it. So you'd get a clock, a pedometer, a dowsing machine. And one of the earliest apps you actually receive is just a completely functional basic calculator.
Which, as a kid, you might use to do your actual real-world math homework while pretending to still be playing the game.
A very common use case, yes.
I'm guilty of that.
But the developers just couldn't resist hiding a layer of interactivity inside the math itself.
Wait, how does it work exactly?
So if you input a mathematical equation, say 12 plus 13, and the result equals the specific Sinnoh Pokedex number of a Pokemon you have already encountered.
Like one that's marked as seen in your game.
Right. If you've seen it, the calculator app won't just display the number 25. The software will actually ping the game's audio files and play that specific Pokemon's electronic cry right through the DS speakers.
So if the answer is 25, you literally hear Pikachu's cry.
Exactly.
I remember testing this out endlessly once I figured it out. It's just such a brilliant piece of world building because it implies that the technology in this universe operates on a unified system.
It's a really good point.
The Pokedex, which records the monsters, and the calculator, they are talking to each other through the Poketch operating system.
It grounds the fantasy. It makes the digital device your character is wearing feel like a tangible, connected piece of consumer technology.
Yeah, like it has its own weird little Bluetooth system.
Exactly. But this philosophy of interconnected, hidden logic, it extends way beyond just the menus and into the actual mechanics of the wild encounters themselves. There is this subtle text change regarding the runaway ability that perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, I love this one. So for those who might not know, abilities are basically these passive traits that every single Pokemon has. They affect battles in various ways.
Right.
And the runaway ability simply guarantees that your creature can successfully flee from a wild battle without failing.
Normally, when a wild Pokemon escapes from battle, the text box at the bottom of the screen just reads, "Got away safely."
Just a standard universal string of text.
Right, but the developers programmed a highly specific conditional logic check just for this one ability. If your active Pokemon has the runaway ability, and the wild Pokemon you are fighting also has the runaway ability, the game actually recognizes that behavioral overlap.
It sees that they both have it.
Yes. So when the wild creature flees, the text changes to "the wild Pokemon fled," instead of the usual message.
It acknowledges the specific interaction. It's kind of like two incredibly skittish animals bumping into each other in the woods.
That's exactly what it is.
One startles, and the other just immediately bolts. It's this tiny narrative told entirely through a single string of conditional text. But I do wonder, when developers bury logic this deep things that maybe a tiny fraction of a percent of players will ever organically notice, does it actually enhance the game? Or is it just like a programmer having fun on their lunch break?
I'd argue it fundamentally changes the texture of the game, even for players who never see that specific text box.
Really? How so?
Because the value of a secret isn't just in the individual discovery, right? It's in the overarching knowledge that secrets actually exist in this world.
Oh, I see.
When a player hears a rumor on the playground or reads on some early internet forum about a mathematical cry on a calculator, it shifts how they view the software. It ceases to be a rigid set of rules and suddenly becomes this landscape of infinite possibility.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It evokes the joy of real-world discovery.
Exactly.
Like finding an obscure interaction feels like exploring the woods behind your house and finding an old, overgrown path that just isn't on any map. It makes the world feel deep. And looking back, Game Freak has been doing this since the very beginning, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. From the very first generation, just consider Pokémon Yellow, which released in the late 90s.
Oh yeah, with the Pikachu that follows you.
Right. The entire gimmick of that game was that a Pikachu sprite followed your character around the overworld map, and you could turn around and interact with it to see a little window showing its current mood.
Yeah, it would smile if it liked you or look super angry if you let it faint in battle.
But what the game never explicitly tells you is that this hidden friendship stat actually alters Pikachu's physics on the map.
Wait, it's physics?
Yes. If Pikachu's friendship stat reaches a value of 80 or above out of the maximum 255, its walking speed animation actually increases by 2.5 times.
No way.
It physically speeds up to keep pace with your character more eagerly.
That is amazing. It is literally a visual representation of affection, communicated entirely through animation frames rather than a text box.
Exactly. Or look at the development history hidden deep in the game's early code. In the beta versions for the original Red and Blue, the Pokémon seal, which is famously just a drawing of a seal with the letter he swapped in.
Not their most creative naming moment.
Right, well, it was originally intended to have an even more literal name. The raw data reveals its beta name was literally just Manatee.
Manatee. That is hilariously literal. It's like calling a dog wolf or a bird pigeon.
It really shows the iterative, very human process of designing these creatures. And, skipping ahead several years to Generation 5, Black and White, we see them using these hidden mechanical tweaks to convey deep psychological traits.
Oh, with the character N, right?
Yes. N is the primary antagonist of those games. And he is this incredibly intense, mathematically driven, idealistic young man who speaks in these rapid, overarching philosophies.
He's a fascinating character. Very unsettling, honestly.
He is, and the developers recognized that just writing intense dialogue for him wasn't enough. They needed the player to really feel his intensity.
So what did they do?
They hard-coded a specific override for his character. Whenever you speak to N, his text speed is forced to display at the absolute maximum speed the game engine allows.
Wait, really? Even if I have my game settings dialed all the way down to a slow text speed? Because I like to read leisurely.
Even then, the game completely overrides your system settings. His dialogue just blasts onto the screen instantly.
Wow.
It forces you to engage with him on a completely different rhythm. It subtly conveys his absolute certainty, his rapid-fire thought process, and really his refusal to slow down for anyone else's comfort.
You literally feel his manic energy because the mechanics of the text box itself are acting aggressively toward you.
Exactly.
That is just brilliant narrative design. But, all of these things, the text speed, the diamond dust, the calculator cries, these were intentionally designed to be found.
Right, they are intended features.
They are aesthetic comforts put there by the creators. But what I find even more fascinating and honestly a bit terrifying is the other layer to these games, the unintended secrets. The moments where the game's architecture bends and basically breaks under its own weight.
The transition from intentional world building to accidental architectural collapse.
Exactly. The glitches in the 4th generation of Pokémon are just legendary. They don't just feel like bugs, they feel like modern ghost stories. And the most famous of all is the Void Glitch, which is also known within the community as tweaking or hole punching.
Yes, the Void Glitch is perhaps the most profound mechanical breakdown in the history of the franchise.
It's massive.
To understand why it's so significant and why it captured the imagination of literally millions of players, we really have to look closely at how the Nintendo DS hardware actually manages memory.
Let's break that down because the Sinnoh map is huge. It's a sprawling continent with mountains, oceans, caves, and dozens of towns. And the Nintendo DS, while it was innovative for its time, had an incredibly tiny amount of processing power and memory.
Right. So to explain this simply, we need to separate the game cartridge from the console itself. The cartridge holds the ROM read-only memory. Think of the ROM as a massive permanent library containing every single piece of data in the game.
Okay, the library.
And the Nintendo DS console contains the RAM random access memory. Think of the RAM as a very small, active workbench.
So the workbench isn't big enough to hold all the books from the library at once.
Precisely. The game engine physically cannot load the entire Sinnoh map onto the RAM workbench simultaneously. The console would just crash instantly.
Right.
So the developers built the overworld map on a massive grid consisting of 32 by 32 tile squares. The game engine is programmed to only keep the square your character is currently standing in, along with the immediately adjacent squares loaded on the active workbench.
So as you walk around, the game is just constantly swapping books out.
Exactly. As you walk across invisible boundaries in the world, which programmers call load lines, the game rapidly dumps the data of the area you just left behind you and pulls the data of the area you are walking into from the ROM library onto the RAM workbench.
It's kind of like rolling out a carpet right before your foot lands and hurriedly rolling it up right after you step off.
That's a great way to picture it. And as long as you walk at a normal pace, the illusion of a continuous, unbroken world is totally maintained.
But players don't always walk at a normal pace.
No, they don't. The developers made a slight miscalculation regarding human behavior and the limitations of their own engine. They introduced a bicycle item that allowed players to shift into a very fast fourth gear.
Oh boy.
And they didn't account for a player getting on that bicycle and moving with erratic mathematical precision at really high speeds.
So this is the tweaking part.
This is tweaking. If a player shifts into the faster fourth gear and rapidly zigzags back and forth across an intersection of multiple load lines, essentially jumping between 4 different map squares in a fraction of a second, the DS processor simply cannot keep up with the demands.
It just gets overwhelmed.
It gets completely confused about which adjacent map tiles it is supposed to dump and which it is supposed to load.
So the person rolling out the carpet basically panics and trips?
And your foot lands on nothing, you step forward, and the game completely fails to load the next environment. The graphics don't exist. The collision data, the invisible walls that tell the game you can't walk through a building or a tree that doesn't exist either. You plunge the player character straight into the void.
A sprawling, pitch-black abyss.
But the thing is, the void isn't empty space. It is the raw, unrendered framework of the entire RAM map grid. It is the scaffolding of the universe, stripped of its paint and its physical rules.
And here is where the Pokemon community essentially transformed into digital archaeologists.
Yeah.
Because in the original Diamond and Pearl releases, players realized that if you stepped into this black void, your game didn't always crash.
No, it did.
You could still walk. You couldn't see anything but pitch black, but you can move.
And because the collision data was gone, you were no longer bound by the physical walls of the intended map. You could literally walk straight through mountains and oceans.
The community figured out that if you used the pedometer app on your Pokédex to track your exact number of steps, you could navigate this darkness.
Which is just incredible.
It blows my mind. People posted these massive text documents on forums saying like, step into the void at Jubilee City, walk exactly 64,000 steps north, turn east, walk exactly 300 steps.
They treated it exactly like maritime navigation, just steering by the stars in a sea of black pixels. And the reason they spent hours walking tens of thousands of steps in complete darkness was for the ultimate prize.
Mythicals.
Right. By navigating to specific coordinates on the invisible grid, players could bypass all the story requirements, intentionally reload the graphics, and suddenly spawn themselves onto event-exclusive islands.
Islands that held mythical Pokemon like Darkrai and Shaman. Nintendo had planned to release special, real-world tickets to access these islands years down the line. But kids were literally walking through the dark matter of the game's code to steal gods early.
It's an incredible story of player ingenuity.
It really is. But when Platinum came out a couple of years later, it was marketed as the definitive fixed version of the game. So I have to assume Game Freak just rewrote the memory management code to stop this, right?
Well, this brings up a fascinating reality of game development, especially under the strict deadlines they had in the mid-2000s. Rewriting the core memory management engine of a massive RPG to fix the load line processing. That would take months of rigorous coding and quality assurance testing.
So they didn't have time.
Game Freak simply didn't have that time or budget for a third version release. So Platinum features what the development community calls a soft patch.
A duct tape solution over a foundational crack.
Exactly. You can actually still perform the tweaking glitch in Pokémon Platinum. You can still ride your bike, break the load lines, and step off the map into the void. The abyss is still there.
Wait, really?
Yes, but if you do, and you try to navigate using those old form coordinates, you will very quickly realize that Game Freak quietly placed invisible solid walls directly within the void data itself.
Wait, why wouldn't they just fix the actual code? Putting an invisible wall inside a glitch seems incredibly lazy for a massive studio.
It's less about laziness and more about, well, triage. Fixing the load lines risks breaking the entire game's stability in completely unforeseen ways. But placing a static collision block at the coordinates surrounding the Darkrai and Shaman Islands, that is a low-risk, high-reward fix.
So what happens if you hit the wall?
If you try to walk there in Platinum, your character hits an invisible wall in the darkness and is permanently trapped. You cannot move forward, you cannot walk back, and you are basically forced to reset your console, losing all your unsaved progress.
Oh my god. They didn't fix the hole in the world, they just built a digital prison in the dark for anyone brave enough to explore it.
They really did.
It really shows how overwhelmed they must have been by the scope of what they built.
Ugh.
Sinnoh was so ambitious. When you have all these complex systems interacting, emergent bugs appear that no one could possibly anticipate.
And the architectural strain is visible everywhere if you look closely enough. There's actually another fascinating anomaly in Platinum regarding the Pokemon Spiritomb that perfectly illustrates how the game engine struggles to maintain its own internal logic.
Spiritomb is already a terrifying concept. The lore says it's a collection of 108 malevolent spirits bound to a keystone.
It's very dark.
And mechanically, in Generation 4, it was an absolute nightmare to fight. Because of its unique combination of ghost and dark typing, it mathematically has 0 weaknesses. No type of move in the entire game was super effective against it.
It was an impenetrable fortress of typing. Now, there's a specific ability in the game called Wonder Guard. This ability makes a Pokemon completely immune to all attacks except those that are super effective.
Okay.
Normally, this ability is exclusive to a very frail, bug-like Pokemon called Shedinja. Spiritomb cannot naturally obtain Wonder Guard.
But players love to break the rules.
They certainly do. Through external hacking or through incredibly convoluted, highly specific in-game skill swap setups during double battles, players realized they could artificially grant the Wonder Guard ability to a Spiritomb.
So, let's just follow the logic here. Spiritomb has no weaknesses. Wonder Guard blocks all damage except weaknesses. Therefore, a Wonder Guard Spiritomb should theoretically be an invincible digital god. No attack can bypass the shield.
The ultimate terrarium, perfectly sealed. But the terrarium cracks.
Yeah.
Due to a highly specific microscopic coding oversight in the game's damage calculation routine, this invincible Spiritomb is strangely vulnerable to exactly one specific move, and that move is Fire Fang.
Fire Fang, not a ghost move, not a psychic move, a standard fire move. Why would a fire move break the math?
It's a complete anomaly deep in the code. It is highly likely an oversight relating to how Fire Fang specifically calculates its secondary effects.
What are its secondary effects?
Fire Fang has a chance to make the opponent flinch, and it also has a chance to cause a burn. The way the code checks for these two separate status conditions simultaneously somehow overrides the Wonder Guard immunity check. It allows the raw damage of the attack to just slip through the cracks.
It's like a computer virus finding a single open port in an otherwise impenetrable firewall. That alone is a really cool technical fact. But you told me something earlier about how the game reacts to this that genuinely unsettled me.
Yes. It is the reaction of the system that elevates this from just a bug to a phenomenon. If you take your invincible glitch Spiritomb into the battle tower, which is the game's endless post-game survival mode where you fight generated opponents,
Right?
the artificial intelligence actually adapts to your broken code.
I still don't fully understand this. How does a 2006 Nintendo DS game adapt?
The Battle Tower AI is designed to dynamically analyze the player's team over time to provide a scaling challenge. As you win streak after streak, the AI looks at the defensive profile of your Pokemon, it analyzes your invincible Spiritomb, runs the damage calculation simulations internally, and recognizes through the raw code that Fire Fang is the only mathematical solution to defeat it.
It finds the anomaly.
It finds the anomaly. And suddenly, the game actively begins generating enemy trainers who specifically bring Pokemon equipped with Fire Fang just to kill your glitch.
That is wild.
It is a defense mechanism. The game learns to use its own broken code against you to maintain the difficulty curve.
That is deeply unsettling. It's exactly like the Matrix sending agents, because it recognizes you are bending the rules of the simulation. The game is literally protecting its own fragile reality from the player. And the deeper you dig into the history of Pokemon, the more of these bizarre reality-bending anomalies you find.
It is a goldmine of digital oddities, and many of them act as fossils of discarded development ideas. Consider the Lost Festa demo of 2002.
This sounds like an urban legend.
It practically is digital folklore at this point. The Festa demo was a kiosk demonstration shown at a Japanese gaming event long before Ruby and Sapphire were actually released. It is considered lost media. No physical ROM of this demo is known to exist today.
So how do we know about it?
We only have blurry photographs taken by attendees and eyewitness accounts from magazines at the time.
Okay, so what makes it so special?
One of the enduring legends of this specific demo comes from a player who recounted a battle between the Pokémon Kecleon and Taillow. Now, Kecleon has an ability that changes its own typing to match the move that just hit it. The player reported using the move Lick, which is a ghost-type attack, against the Taillow.
Okay, but in the final release games, Taillow is a normal and flying type. Normal types are completely immune to ghost attacks. The move shouldn't have affected it at all.
Precisely. But in this demo, the attack hit, and Kecleon transformed. This implies that in 2002, deep in the development cycle, Taillow was actually programmed with a one-of-a-kind pure flying typing. Yes, and pure flying was something that didn't officially exist on any basic Pokemon until Generation 5, almost a decade later. It's a fossil of an alternate reality where the elemental rules were just fundamentally different.
I love that we can piece together the creative process through these tiny glitches, or even just through human error. I'm thinking of the Korean release of Gold and Silver. There's that famously tiny text glitch.
Ah, yes. When a Pokemon uses the move Thunder in the Korean localization, the text box prints the attack name. But there is this strange, unexplainable extra space between the word lightning and the exclamation point. It's incredibly insignificant mechanically.
But people document it obsessively. It's like finding a fingerprint on the inside of a meticulously crafted watch face. It doesn't ruin the watch and it doesn't change how it tells time, but it breaks the illusion of machine-made perfection. It reminds you that a tired, overworked human being assembled this code late at night.
That is a very apt analogy. And sometimes those tired hidden errors result in bizarre logic hiccups that just defy all explanation. My personal favorite is the Lake Verity dual slot oddity in Sinnoh.
This involves the hardware of the DS itself, right? Because the original Nintendo DS had two slots. The top slot was for the small DS cartridges, and the bottom slot was for the older, larger Game Boy Advance cartridges.
Yes, and Game Freak utilized this hardware feature brilliantly. If you plugged certain older GBA Pokemon games into the bottom slot while playing Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum, it would actively alter the wild encounters in your DS game. It was a really neat reward for owning the older titles.
Like, if you had Pokemon Ruby inserted, the game would read that data, and suddenly you could find a Sinnoh, a Pokemon from Ruby, wandering around the Sinnoh forests.
Yes, thematic crossover, but the system breaks down spectacularly at Lake Verity.
What happened?
If you insert the GBA games Fire Red or Leaf Green and walk into the tall grass at Lake Verity, the game doesn't spawn thematic fire or grass-type encounters. Instead, the game spawns Bidoof and Starly at incredibly low levels, usually level 2 through 4, at a minuscule 4% encounter rate.
But Bidoof and Starly are the default, basic birds and rodents of the Sinnoh region. They are already everywhere. You don't need a GBA cartridge to find them.
Exactly, it's a complete programming error. By inserting the GBA cartridge, the game attempts to load a special encounter table, but it points to the wrong string of data. It basically overrides the normal encounters with a glitched secondary table of basic monsters that serves absolutely no purpose and directly contradicts the logic of the dual slot feature.
It's a complete hiccup in the matrix.
Yes.
Exploring the dark, empty void of the game's code, or finding these strange logic hiccups, feels undeniably eerie. But the irony of these glitches is that while players are terrified of walking into the unintended darkness of the void, Game Freak was intentionally programming actual terrifying darkness right into the map.
They really were.
You don't need a glitch to be unsettled in Sinnoh. Which brings us to the midpoint of our journey today. To truly appreciate the emotional depth of this franchise, we have to spend some time decoding the dark corners of its actual written lore.
The Pokemon universe is overwhelmingly presented as bright, optimistic, and fundamentally categorizable. You are given a Pokédex, which is a scientific tool designed to explain, measure, and record every single creature you find. The core fantasy is mastery and understanding.
Right.
But the developers deliberately introduce elements that violently defy this categorization. They introduce actual, literal human ghosts.
Yes, and we have to make a clear distinction here. We are not talking about ghost-type Pokemon like Gengar or Duskull. Those are monsters you can battle and catch.
Right.
We are talking about the restless spirits of human beings. The Old Chateau in Eterna Forest and Platinum is the perfect example of this tonal shift.
The Old Chateau is just a masterclass in atmospheric tension. You walk out of a brightly lit, cheerful forest and enter this crumbling, abandoned mansion.
It's so jarring.
And the music instantly shifts to a discordant, unsettling track that completely lacks the driving rhythm of the rest of the game. But the true horror is in the visual details.
You walk into the grand dining room, and if you enter at the exact right moment, you see the sprite of an old man, likely butler, on the other side of the long table.
And crucially, he doesn't have a walking animation. His sprite simply glides smoothly across the floor. He moves horizontally across the room, floats directly through a solid wall, and vanishes.
It is so jarring the first time you see it. And if you go upstairs into one of the bedrooms, a little girl does the exact same thing. She just glides out of the room. As a player conditioned to interact with literally everything, your first instinct is to run after them.
Naturally.
But you can't talk to them. You can't initiate a battle. You can't throw a Pokeball at them. They just exist to watch you. And then there's that painting.
Ah, the painting. In one of the upper rooms, there is a painting on the wall with glowing red eyes. As your character moves horizontally across the room, the red eyes appear to actually track your movement.
Ugh, creepy.
It implies a tragic, violent history to the location that the game flatly refuses to explain. There is no diary entry telling you how the butler and the girl died. There is no quest to put their souls to rest. There is only the lingering echo of their presence.
It's the refusal to explain that makes it so scary. And it's not just confined to the chateau. Platinum has another terrifying encounter later in the game on Route 217.
Oh, the blizzard.
Yeah, you are trudging through this blinding blizzard. Your character's movement speed is drastically reduced by the deep snow. The music is just the howling of the wind, and visibility is terrible. You eventually stumble upon a dark, isolated cabin.
You enter the cabin seeking shelter, and the interior lights are off. A lone woman is standing in the gloom. When you speak to her, her dialogue is fragmented, full of pauses. She says something to the effect of, "A person, a rare sight. Thank you for visiting. A gift." And she hands you a spell tag.
Which is an item specifically used to boost the power of ghost-type moves.
Yes, and after she gives it to you, she stops talking.
You walk out the door, back into the blizzard, but inevitably you think, wait, that was a really weird interaction, so you turn around and immediately walk back inside the cabin.
And she is gone. The cabin is empty, but the environment has changed. The lights, which were turned off while she was standing there, are now suddenly turned on.
The implication is chilling.
It really is. The darkness of the room was fundamentally tied to her presence. When her spirit departed, the natural light returned.
This draws heavily on real mythology, doesn't it? It feels very specific.
It draws directly from Japanese folklore. It is a representation of the Yuki-onna, or Yuki-onna is an eerie, otherworldly spirit that appears to travelers lost in severe blizzards.
Oh, wow.
Often she is predatory, leading travelers astray to freeze, but sometimes she merely marks the boundary between life and death, offering a strange gift before vanishing.
By placing a Yuki-onna in a Pokemon game, Game Freak is doing something very intentional, aren't they?
They are teaching the player a lesson in humility. They are demonstrating that not everything in the world can be categorized, captured, or explained by the scientific method of the Pokédex.
That is such a crucial point. Most of this franchise is about explaining everything. You categorize types, you track IV stats, you breed for perfect genetics. You are the absolute master of the monsters. But encountering a human spirit completely strips the player of all their power. You can't fight the Yuki-onna. You can't catch the little girl in the old chateau. Is that deliberate contrast exactly what makes them so deeply unsettling?
I believe so, yes. It creates a profound sense of awe and unease by completely removing player agency, and it's a motif they continue to escalate throughout the franchise. The Ghost Girl phenomenon is practically a staple of the series now. In Generation 6, Pokemon X and Y, there's an incredibly jarring encounter in Lumiose City that traumatized a lot of players.
Oh, the elevator ghost. This one abandons subtlety entirely.
It really does. You enter a completely unremarkable generic office building in the city. You ride the elevator to the second floor expecting generic NPCs. But when the doors open, the background music stops completely. The screen flashes black. Suddenly, a hex maniac character model is standing directly behind your character.
Just inches away.
She doesn't walk. She glides forward without moving her legs, completely ignoring the game's standard animation rigging. The screen pauses, freezing your character in place, and a text box appears that simply says, "No, you're not the one." Then the screen flashes black again, and she is gone. The music resumes as if nothing happened.
Who is the one? We never find out. It's been over a decade, and we still have absolutely no idea who she was looking for.
We never do. And the lore expands across other regions, too. In Generation 5, Black and White, as you walk across the Marvelous Bridge, an NPC standing nearby is visibly shocked when a little girl suddenly vanishes into thin air right next to him. In the direct sequel, Black 2 and White 2, you explore the Strange House, a location where the furniture moves autonomously. You encounter the ghost of that exact same girl from the bridge. Through scattered, cryptic dialogue, you piece together her tragic story. She was trapped in endless, fatal nightmares caused by the mythical Pokémon Darkrai.
She literally died in her sleep from magical nightmares. In a game marketed to 10-year-olds, she leaves behind a lunar wing, an item meant to cure nightmares, asking you to return it. It's so deeply sorrowful.
We see this sorrow again in Generation 8, Sword and Shield. In the medieval city of Hammerlock, a little girl named Paula asks you to deliver a love letter to a boy named Frank in another town. You travel across the region, find Frank, and realize he is an elderly man.
Oh, this one hurts.
He tells you he used to play with Paula when they were young children, but she fell ill and passed away decades ago.
When you go back to Hammerlock to tell Paula, she's gone. All that's left on the ground where she was standing is a Reaper Cloth, which is an evolutionary item heavily associated with the underworld and the afterlife.
What's fascinating here is the rigid mechanical distinction between ghost-type Pokemon and actual ghosts. A Pokemon like Phantump is described in the Pokedex as a rotten stump possessed by the spirit of a lost child who died in the woods. That is horrific lore. But mechanically, Phantump is still bound by the rules of the game. It has hit points, it takes mathematical damage, it can be contained inside a mass-produced Pokeball.
You can tame it?
But the ghost of Paula, or the ghost girl standing silently behind Elite Four Phoebe in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, who appears for literally a split second in the background during a cinematic cutscene, they exist entirely outside the mechanical rules of the universe. They cannot be contained, measured, or fought.
It's a constant reminder that the world is bigger, older, and more unknowable than the player's capacity to control it. But some of the most haunting mysteries in Pokemon aren't the ghosts themselves. Sometimes the scariest things are the silent, abandoned spaces. The stories that were completely cut from the game before players ever got to see them.
Digital ruins. Shadow data. This brings us to the silent sanctuaries of Sinnoh. There are fully realized pieces of art, complex architecture, and sweeping musical tracks permanently locked away in the game's code, existing only like buried treasure waiting for forensic data miners to unearth them.
Let's talk about the foreign building in Heart Home City, because when I first played Platinum, this place freaked me out more than the old chateau, specifically because of what was missing.
The silence.
Yes. Heart Home is a bustling, vibrant city. There's upbeat jazz music playing, NPCs walking everywhere, contests happening. You walk up to this massive church-like cathedral, complete with huge stained glass windows. You walk inside, and nothing. Total suffocating silence.
It is a massive rarity in the Pokemon franchise for an interior room to have absolutely no background music. Audio is a primary tool for emotional cueing in game design. It tells the player how they should feel. By completely removing the music, the developers create an immediate, shocking sense of reverence, isolation, and deep unease.
There's nothing to do inside. There are no hidden items to find, no gym leaders to battle.
There are just a few NPCs standing in the silence. When you speak to them, they don't offer tips or trade requests. They discuss the philosophical nature of the human spirit, the interconnectedness of all living things, and the mysterious origins of the universe.
It feels like an unfinished thought. Like something massive, something truly grand was supposed to happen in that cathedral, but it got stripped out at the last second, leaving only the shell, which ties perfectly into the greatest unsolved mystery of Generation 4 and, frankly, the entire franchise. The Azure Flute and the Hall of Origin.
Ah, the lore of Arceus. Within the sprawling mythology of the Sinnoh region, Arceus is not just a powerful monster, it is the creator deity.
Literal god.
Yes. The lore states it was the first Pokemon to emerge from an egg in a place where there was nothing, and it shaped the universe with its 1,000 arms. Game Freak didn't just write this lore, they programmed an incredible, epic encounter with God itself directly into Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum.
You were supposed to receive a real-world event item called the Azure Flute. You take this flute to the highest peak in the region, the spear pillar at the top of Mount Coronet. You stand on a specific tile, and the game prompts you to blow the flute. The game plays this haunting, echoing, slightly discordant melody that sounds like nothing else in the soundtrack. Suddenly, a glowing staircase made of pure light materializes out of thin air, leading high up into the sky.
It leads to the Hall of Origin, a glowing, glass-like platform suspended high in the atmosphere above the clouds, where a level 80 Arceus waits for you. It's a glorious, fully programmed, fully realized climax to the mythology of the game. It is the ultimate summit of the Pokémon journey. The legitimate players never saw it. The Azure Flute was never distributed, ever.
Right. The director of the games, Junichi Masuda, gave an interview years later where he finally addressed this. He claimed they decided not to release the Azure Flute because it was too confusing for players to figure out how to use.
That was his official statement, yes.
I had to push back on that excuse heavily. You literally just walk to the top of the mountain you've already visited for the story climax, and the game explicitly prompts you to use it. It's not harder than anything else in the game. Was he just making an excuse for a different failure?
Masuda's explanation has always been viewed with intense skepticism by the community. The forensic truth, when you look at the timeline and the code, points entirely to corporate marketing panic and the mechanical failures we discussed earlier. Remember the void glitch in Diamond and Pearl? The fact that players could walk into the darkness and catch mythical Pokemon like Darkrai and Shaymin without needing the official event items?
Yeah, they completely broke the physical distribution model.
Yeah.
Kids didn't need to go to a store to get the ticket. They just walk through the abyss.
Exactly. When it came time to finally release Arceus, which was tied to the theatrical release of the Arceus movie in 2009, Game Freak and Nintendo realized their event item infrastructure was fatally compromised. If they distributed the Azure Flute via Wi-Fi or in stores, players who had already glitched their way into the Hall of Origin, or players who had messed up their game's event flags by tweaking incorrectly would have a broken, glitchy experience. The software might crash.
They couldn't guarantee a clean experience.
Furthermore, to maintain mechanical consistency between players who own the glitchy Diamond and Pearl cartridges and the patched Platinum cartridges, they made a hard pivot. They abandoned the Azure Flute entirely. Instead, they decided to distribute Arceus directly to the player at retail events.
So instead of climbing a mountain, playing a magical flute, and ascending a staircase of light to fight God, you walked into a Toys R Us, connected to a local router, and the delivery man in a green suit inside a Pokemon Center just handed you the God of the universe. Here's your deity, sign here. It's so aggressively anticlimactic.
It is the ultimate triumph of logistics over art. And it left the Hall of Origin, this beautiful, musically distinct, emotionally resonant map, as a permanent ghost map. It exists in the code of tens of millions of cartridges sitting on shelves around the world, but it was permanently locked away from the public. It became a digital ruin.
But if the Azure Flute was genuinely just too confusing and they were happy to abandon it, why did they bother programming the incredibly complex Sinnoh Ruins event in the very next games? Heart Gold and Soul Silver.
That is the big question.
If you take a Hall of Origin Arceus, which you could only get by cheating or hacking the flute into your game and transfer it into Heart Gold, it triggers a massive, terrifying cutscene where Arceus literally creates a new universe right in front of you. Real-world photographs of galaxies flash on the screen. It feels like the developers desperately wanted us to see the majesty of this creature, but corporate marketing got in the way.
The Sinnoh Ruins event is the definitive proof of the friction between the artistic ambition of the developers and the cold realities of software distribution. The creators clearly viewed Arceus and the Hall of Origin as the absolute pinnacle of their narrative design. They embedded failsafes and deeply connected lore in subsequent games, hoping the flute would one day see the light, or at least rewarding the hackers who dug it up.
And the fans definitely felt that ambition. The community reacts to lost content with such obsession. Look at the retire glitch. Years later, fans figured out that by manipulating a specific menu option, the retire button meant for a completely different area like the Safari Zone, they could trick the game's RAM into loading Arceus' battle script without ever needing the flute. They will never stop digging for these ruins.
The dedication of digital archaeologists is astounding, and it extends far beyond Sinnoh. Consider the debug ROM discovery in 2014. A user on an obscure forum managed to purchase an old, back-end development cartridge of a Generation 3 game. Inside the raw, uncompiled code was text for an unreleased e-reader card event.
The e-reader was that weird peripheral you swiped physical cards through, right?
Yes. The code described an event involving an NPC giving the player a love disc holding a berry juice. This event never existed in the real world, no card was ever printed. The only proof that this idea was ever conceptualized by a human mind was buried in debug code for over a decade before someone found it.
It's exactly like using X-rays on a famous Renaissance painting and finding an abandoned sketch of a different face underneath the paint. Or the weirdest cross-pollination event, the 2011 puzzle horror game Catherine, developed by Atlas.
Oh, this is a fascinating one.
It is a mature, complex game, totally unrelated to Nintendo or Pokémon. But data miners digging through Catherine's audio files found an unused music track buried deep in the code that bears a striking, undeniable resemblance to the Diamond and Pearl battle theme. How does that even happen?
It speaks to the messy, collaborative, and often chaotic nature of game development. Composers work across studios, assets are shared on hard drives, temp tracks are used during prototyping, and accidentally left behind. These digital artifacts tell the human story of the game's creation. We see this explicitly explored within the narrative of Platinum itself through Charon's notebooks.
Oh, the secret Rotom room in the Team Galactic Eterna building. This is a brilliant piece of environmental storytelling.
Yes. Through an obscure Wi-Fi event, you could obtain a secret key. If you take this key to the villainous Team Galactic's building, you can unlock a hidden room filled with various household appliances, a microwave, a washing machine, a lawnmower. The Pokémon Rotom, which is a ghost mode of plasma, can possess these appliances to change its form. But the real treasure in that room isn't the mechanic, it's the text left behind.
You find 2 notebooks sitting on a desk.
One is a diary written by Charon, the arrogant, elderly scientist of Team Galactic. His writing is cold, calculating, and ruthlessly pragmatic. He details his scientific discovery of Rotom and his obsessive desire to weaponize its form-changing abilities for personal glory and corporate power.
And right next to it, on the exact same desk, is the old notebook. It's written from the perspective of a child. It describes an innocent, profound, and purely joyful friendship with a Rotom that used to hide in a lawnmower to surprise them. The emotional contrast between the 2 books is staggering.
It's a microcosm of the game's entire thematic struggle. The clash between cold, corporate, mechanical realities represented by Charon, Team Galactic, and perhaps even the real-world decisions to cut the Azure Flute, and the beautiful, messy human spirit represented by the child's friendship and the developers who pour their souls into the code.
Which brings us perfectly to the core narrative theme of Pokémon Platinum, a theme entirely embodied by its terrifying villain, Cyrus.
Cyrus is perhaps the most philosophically complex antagonist in the history of the franchise. He isn't a mafia boss trying to steal Pokémon for profit like Giovanni in Generation 1, and he isn't a misguided eco-terrorist trying to expand the oceans like Archie in Generation 3. Cyrus is a fundamental nihilist.
He looks at the universe, looks at human behavior, and feels nothing but disgust.
He believes that the human spirit, which the game explicitly defines as emotion, knowledge, and willpower, represented physically by the 3 lake legendary Pokémon, is inherently flawed. He believes that emotions cause suffering, knowledge causes strife, and willpower causes conflict. His ultimate goal is not to rule the universe as a dictator. It is to use the gods of time and space, Dialga and Palkia, to unmake reality entirely. He wants to reset the universe back to zero, creating a perfect, emotionless void where he is the sole, untroubled deity.
It's chilling. He wants to wipe the slate clean because he cannot handle the messy, painful reality of human interaction. He views the human heart as a glitch in the code of the universe that needs to be patched out. But the universe has a defense mechanism against that kind of absolute sterility.
Giratina and the Distortion World. When Cyrus stands at the spear pillar, binding the gods of time and space with the red chain, he believes he has won. The universe begins to fracture, but he failed to account for the cosmic counterweight. Giratina, the deity of antimatter, the shadow of reality, erupts from the ground as a massive serpentine shadow and violently drags Cyrus into the Distortion World.
The Distortion World is such an incredible piece of level design, especially on the DS hardware. The camera angle shifts dynamically, pulling back to show massive floating platforms. You are walking sideways on vertical walls, surfing down waterfalls that defy physics and flow upward into the sky. Gravity is entirely broken. Trees materialize out of thin air and vanish as you walk past them. It is a visual representation of pure chaos.
It acts as the necessary cosmic counterweight to our reality. Cyrus believes that by destroying our world, he achieves perfection. Giratina's realm proves that light cannot exist without shadow. The messy, chaotic, logic-defying Distortion World is necessary to maintain the balance of the beautiful, orderly, real world. It absorbs the universe's imbalances. When you finally defeat Cyrus at the deepest point of this realm, he refuses to learn. He chooses to stay in the darkness, unable to accept that a flawed, emotional world has value.
It's an incredibly heavy philosophical concept for a game ostensibly about catching elemental creatures. And the way the developers counter Cyrus's nihilism isn't just by having the player beat him in a boss fight. It's how they design the deeper lore of the series itself. Because while Cyrus wants to erase human history, the creators anchored their mythology directly into the physical, real-world history of humanity. Let's talk of the Johto region, the ruins of Alph.
This is where the franchise transcends fantasy and becomes a vessel for actual preservation. Generation 2, Gold and Silver, and their remakes Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which share a game engine and generation with Platinum, feature the ruins of Alph. It's an ancient, mysterious archaeological site filled with the unexplainable Pokémon unknown, which look like floating letters of the alphabet. For years, Western players assumed it was just fantasy flavor text. But the ruins of Alph are heavily, meticulously based on a real location, Asuka, Japan.
Asuka is this small, ancient village in the Kansai region, right? It's famous for its archaeological sites dating back over 1,000 years.
Exactly. The visual design of the ruins of Alph is not arbitrary fantasy. It is directly inspired by the Iwayama Tumulus, a massive megalithic stone tomb built in Asuka in the 7th century. If you look at photos of the real-world tomb and compare it to the pixel art in the game, the entrance to the ruins is practically a one-to-one recreation.
That is mind-blowing. They put a literal 7th century tomb into the game, and it goes deeper than just the architecture, doesn't it? The unknown themselves, these bizarre eye-shaped hieroglyph Pokemon that players spend hours collecting, what are they based on?
They draw visual and conceptual inspiration from ancient kofun, which are massive, keyhole-shaped graves built between the 3rd and 7th centuries across Japan. These enormous earthwork tombs look remarkably like the body structure of the unknown when viewed from the sky. The developers took the deepest, most silent mysteries of Japanese archaeology and turned them into digital creatures for children to discover.
And it connects perfectly to the broader mythology of that region, specifically the legendary birds Ho-Oh and Lugia.
Right. In the lore of the game, there are the Kimono Girls, who represent an ancient, dedicated clan tasked with preserving the history of Ho-Oh and Lugia. In real-world Asuka, during the exact same historical period the game references, there were 2 powerful warring clans shaping the future of the nation. The game's Kimono Girls represent the real world, 5 ladies of Asuka, pivotal historical figures in the introduction and formation of Buddhism in Japan. Furthermore, Ho and Lugia themselves, representing the Golden Sun and the Silver Moon, are direct reflections of 1,500-year-old Japanese constellations found painted on the ceilings of these ancient sealed tombs.
It's poetic, isn't it? Think about the narrative contrast. Cyrus, the villain of Platinum, is terrified of the messy flaws of the human spirit. He wants to wipe away all history, all emotion, and leave a sterile blank slate. Yet the creators of the game anchored their most mysterious creatures, the unknown, the Johto legends, the deep lore directly into the physical graves, the artifacts, and the spiritual history of our ancient ancestors.
It is a direct, playable rebuttal to Cyrus's philosophy. The developers didn't just want kids to play a mechanical game about numbers and stats. They wanted them to feel the profound awe of exploring an actual ancient ruin. They took the energy, the mythology, and the reverence of a 2,000-year-old human civilization and meticulously embedded it into the binary code of a Nintendo cartridge to ensure it lives on forever. They proved through their art that the human spirit isn't something to be erased. It is something to be immortalized.
Let's just gently bring ourselves back from the depths of that lore for a moment. Take a deep breath. We've traveled incredibly far today, through so many layers of code and history. We started with the quiet, soothing beauty of diamond dust falling on a snowy town to celebrate a creator's birthday. We navigated the terrifying broken realities of the void, counting steps in the dark and bumping into invisible walls. We shivered past the silent ghosts of the old chateau and the Yukiona in the blizzard. And we ended up walking through the real-world ancient tombs of Asuka, Japan, preserved forever in pixels.
It has been a profound journey through the architecture of a digital masterpiece, looking at both its flawless artistic achievements and its fascinating structural cracks.
And it reminds us that by decoding the dark parts of these games, the shadows, the glitches, the lost data, the unreleased flutes, we don't just find spooky stories or broken code. We find the profound, beating heart of the human beings who spent years of their lives creating them. We find their passions, their mistakes, their late-night typos, and their deep reverence for history.
If I can leave you with one final thought to mull over tonight as the rain continues to tap against the glass, it's this. In a world of constant, brightly lit information overload where everything is instantly searchable and explained, maybe the glitches, the unused code, and the invisible ghosts of Pokemon are just our modern equivalent of folklore. In the absence of dark, uncharted forests and blank spots on physical maps, are we just telling campfire stories around the glow of a Nintendo DS screen? The medium changes, but the human need to search the shadows for magic remains exactly the same.
A campfire story told in pixels and code. Thank you so much for joining us in the quiet comfort of this exploration today. If you enjoyed wrapping up in a blanket, decoding the dark, and exploring these mysteries with us, please like and subscribe to this deep dive. We have so many more shadows to explore and so many more worlds to unpack. Until next time, stay curious.